A faint glow illuminated the skyline of Ionis City when the alarm first echoed through the streets. Nighttime curfews were routine under the regime of the Galatrex Dominion, but the shrill wail meant more than a reminder of suppressed liberty. It carried a tinge of urgency, a sense of approaching danger. Civilians scurried for cover beneath half-cassed shelters that bore the bright red insignia of the Dominion. Metal shutters rattled down on windows, squeaking in protest. Barely anyone dared to look up at the dark sky for fear of seeing the silhouettes of Dominion patrol craft circling overhead. Most people simply bowed their heads and hoped to survive another night without drawing attention. In an old, run-down apartment complex at the edge of the city, a solitary light remained on. Behind chipped walls, inside that modest dwelling lived Rune, an ordinary maintenance technician by trade. Every weekday, Rune toiled deep below ground in Ionis City's labyrinth of water purifiers, ensuring that each cluster of civilians received clean water. It was a menial job, overlooked by many, but vital in a place where brilliance rewarded only the Dominion's elite. For a while, Rune believed that a quiet life spent repairing broken pipes and breathing in stale recycled air was simpler than risking confrontation with the powers that be. Yet everything changed on a sweltering evening when a Dominion foot patrol arrested Rune's neighbor for allegedly circulating rebel propaganda. The neighbor, an elderly man who had barely set foot outside his apartment for months, was deemed an enemy of the state. Something inside Rune snapped that night. Standing helpless in the hallway while the Dominion soldiers dragged the old man away, Rune felt a simmering fury start to stir. That anger, aimed at the injustice inherent in the Dominion's oppressive rule, seethed beneath a facade of compliance. Word on the street was that local guerrilla groups, offshoots of the broader resistance, were searching for recruits. Their clandestine networks extended from the sewers below the city to abandoned train routes on planetary outskirts. Yet approaching them was risky. The Dominion had perfected infiltration. Hiring street informants and turning once trusted friends into watchers made the city a giant trap. Rune kept a low profile, using the large maintenance tunnels at night to avoid notice while exploring leads. Only the dull hum of water pumps gave comfort in those subterranean chambers. One night, in the damp corridors near the main water treatment plant, Rune encountered a small group of men and women huddled in conversation. Their stances were tense, and wary glances flicked across the intersection of pipes and wires where they stood. Rune recognized the red phoenix patch on one man's jacket, a rumored emblem of the Ionis resistance. Summoning the courage to speak up, Rune approached them quietly, hands raised in a sign of peace. The men and women reacted with alarm, reaching for concealed weapons. Rune froze, heart pounding, but managed to choke out the words that had been tormenting for days. "I can't stand by anymore. Let me help." They didn't trust Rune at first. They asked questions, pointed, intimidating, and thorough. Rune offered to help sabotage a Dominion water purification checkpoint used to track suspicious residences by analyzing water consumption data. The patchwearers grilled Rune on the practicality of such an operation, demanding exact knowledge of tool usage, guard schedules, and infiltration routes. Under that relentless questioning, Rune's sense of futility nearly became overwhelming. Yet, the hope buried deep inside refused to fade. The old man's anguished face, twisted in fear as he was dragged away, fueled Rune's resolve. A few nights later, Rune led them, under cover of darkness, to one of the lesser-guarded filtration stations. The group worked swiftly, overriding the data terminals and rerouting water flow. Dominion troopers would discover only scrambled data come morning, delaying their oppressive analytics by weeks. While not a grand victory, it was a glimmer of defiance. The Phoenix patchwearers leapt quietly, but told Rune they would be in touch, an unspoken invitation into their clandestine circle. In the days to follow, an increased Dominion presence prowled the city's alleys. Informational bulletins demanded civilians report suspicious activity. Rune felt no regret. It was a small sabotage, but contributed to a larger cause. Still, an undercurrent of dread lingered. Every knock at the door, Every passing soldier sowed panic. At the maintenance job, Rune tried to appear indifferent, just another exhausted worker. Yet Rune's heart raced with new questions. Where was the old man now? How many others like him had been snatched away without cause? Amid fear and uncertainty, it was an almost mundane chore that changed everything forever. One night, after a long shift, Rune found a grave malfunction in a storage facility behind an abandoned factory. The place was rumored to be a Dominion cache for contraband. Liquid coolant from a faulty valve had flooded half the room. Flashlight in hand, Rune stepped gingerly across the slick floor. Hissing pipes spewed a frosty mist. Leaning in with a wrench, Rune struggled to tighten the faulty valve, only to hear a weak call echo through the dark. Following the sound, Rune came upon a makeshift cell in the corner. Within its corroded bars lay a group of prisoners, bound and gagged. Among them was a small child, barely conscious. Rune forced the lock open with metal cutters from the tool belt. After hastily freeing the gagged prisoners, Rune discovered that the child's mother was missing, forcibly taken elsewhere. Frantic pleas rose. "Help us! The soldiers will return any minute!" Compassion seized Rune faster than caution could intervene. Without hesitation, Rune led them through the damaged facility, helped them evade the patrolling guard, and ushered them into a side shaft that connected to the city's drainage system. Wading through murky runoff, they crawled away from that improvised prison. Although it was suffocatingly dark, Rune's knowledge of the tunnels guided them to safety in an abandoned subway station. It was only after they emerged into stale air that the rescued prisoners saw who had saved them. Their astonished gratitude, overshadowed by the heartbreak of an unknown fate for the missing mother, was etched onto each face. One man managed to record the entire rescue on his battered handheld device. Unbeknownst to Rune, that recording found its way onto the illicit data streams that spread through the city and beyond. Within days, rumors abounded of a singular heroic act. A lone civilian had rescued innocents right under the Dominion's nose. Grainy video footage circulated, capturing every second of urgency, fear, and resilience. The grown man hoisting a battered prisoner over his shoulder. The child leaning on a stranger's supportive arm. The whispered instructions as they disappeared into the sewers. For so long, the city had only known stifled voices and close calls. Suddenly, a single brave deed, caught on camera, smashed through the wall of terror. Social circles buzzed with the story. The Ionis resistance recognized that someone with intimate knowledge of the city's infrastructure had risked everything to do what the Dominion would label treason. Whispers of hope sparked in the darkest corners. Civilians who felt alone in their despair saw a symbol in that grainy footage. If an ordinary maintenance technician could defy the regime, perhaps others could too. Rune, of course, had no idea about the growing legend. Nervous and exhausted from the rescue, Rune stayed home for several days, unwilling to risk stepping outside except for the essential shift. The dread of Dominion reprisal festered. Passing a group of laborers in the water purification zone one day, Rune overheard excited gossip about the unknown rescuer. People stared with open curiosity, hoping perhaps the hero stood among them. Watching them, Rune felt fear battling pride inside. Before the next covert meeting with the Phoenix Patch rebels, Dominion propaganda videos flooded the public screens that dotted Ionis City. An imposing Dominion officer pronounced that any civilian suspected of assisting illegal detainees would be severely punished. The officer assured viewers that the so-called heroic rescue was a distortion of facts. According to the Dominion, those freed were violent criminals. The propaganda, dripping with false confidence, only served to confirm to many that the story was real. While fear was their weapon, it was overshadowed by the resonance of a single, defiant act. When Rune eventually reconnected with the Ionis resistance group, their reaction was electrifying. They demanded details of the rescue, wanting to know every inch of the path taken and any weaknesses in Dominion defenses. The group's leader, a stoic woman named Valora, saw in Rune something more than a companion or saboteur. She recognized how the viral footage, though incredibly dangerous for Rune, could be exploited to rally the oppressed masses. The Ionis resistance needed figureheads, something that transcended their secretive cells and infighting. She proposed that Rune take a more visible role, but that notion terrified Rune. Stealth had always been easier than boldness. Yet, events were spiraling beyond anyone's control. The videos spread, even reached neighboring cities across the continent. Smuggled transmissions from off-world communities began referencing the Ionis hero, fueling a small wave of sympathy among other oppressed populations. Oddly enough, no one knew Rune's identity. The footage was too low quality, but the rumor was enough to stir imaginations. In distant outposts, some even believed the rescuer to be an entire team of rebels, or possibly an extraterrestrial operative in disguise. The Dominion propaganda machine flailed, attempting to discredit the story at every turn. Meanwhile, acts of civil disobedience cropped up. Ionis's narrow boulevards saw young people gathering in stolen minutes before nightly curfew, unfurling small scraps of cloth with a makeshift emblem representing the mysterious rescuer, an outline of a figure carrying a wounded prisoner and a child. Dominion watchers arrived swiftly, but ephemeral as the images were, the notion they represented could not be erased. The city vibrated with pent-up frustration, the realm of subjugation trembling on the edge of an uproar. One person's bravery had become a rallying cry. Aware of this mounting tension, Valora set a plan into motion. The Ionis resistance arranged to publicly identify Rune as the face behind the now famous rescue. But Rune resisted. Being singled out in a city crawling with Dominion informants guaranteed a short lifespan. Yet Valora insisted that the people needed a tangible sign of leadership, a living person to stand for those who daily withstood Dominion oppression. In a hushed meeting in an abandoned subway tunnel lit by a single electric torch, she finally convinced Rune. They need hope, and hope needs a name, a face. You could unify them where we have failed. It's bigger than just you or me. Rune's heart pounded as the full weight of responsibility sank in. Training with barricades, sabotage, infiltration, these were tasks that might go unnoticed. But stepping forward to become a symbol meant forging an unbreakable bond with those who yearned for liberation. It meant shouldering the collective dreams and pain of countless oppressed souls. It meant painting a target on one's own back. Yet, how could Rune turn away after hearing the countless testimonies of battered families, people forced to watch the Dominion snatch loved ones? The answer was written in the tearful eyes of mothers who had lost hope, and the defiant graffiti scrawled by the youth in hidden alleyways. Rune realized that stepping into the light was the only real path forward. Preparations for the unveiling began swiftly. The Ionis resistance tapped into smuggled broadcast equipment, an old transmitter. Keeping it hidden from the Dominion was no easy feat. Volatile roamers scoured the area for such contraband, meaning the broadcast would be short and precarious. But sometimes a single flash was more powerful than endless silence. Rune would appear on camera for a brief message, ensuring it was recorded and transmitted across the clandestine data network before the Dominion jammed the signal. In an old abandoned film studio on the outskirts of Ionis, Rune stood nervously amid the dusty set piece. A cracked mirror reflected the anxious face of someone who never asked to be a hero. Finally, the camera rolled, capturing Rune's voice, unwavering despite the pounding heart. "I'm just a maintenance worker," Rune said, staring into the lens as though speaking to every citizen out there. "I am no warrior, no high-born official. I am a human being like you, and I am tired of the Dominion deciding who lives and who disappears. Alone, we feel powerless. Together, we stand unbreakable." Those words didn't last more than 2 minutes of footage before the Dominion's jamming frequencies kicked in, abruptly cutting the live feed. But it was enough. Millions across the city and beyond soon watched the recording, repeatedly shared through hidden channels, and in countless corners the skies echoed with renewed defiance. The simple authenticity of Rune's message, someone not born into any special lineage, just an ordinary citizen forced into extraordinary circumstances, was galvanizing. Within a week, Iona City became the epicenter of unprecedented protests. People poured into the main square in broad daylight. At first they wore disguises or kept their heads low. But as more bodies assembled, a surge of collective courage erased caution. A chant began. "Unity is strength. Unity is strength." The Dominion's troops responded with stun batons and sonic dispersal guns. The first blasts rippled across the crowds, sending waves of panic. And yet, unbelievably, the crowds reformed. Another wave of blasts came. More screams, more confusion. But from the vantage points on half-crumbled rooftops, watchers could see that the crowd never fully scattered. Rune was there, disguised at first, weaving through the sea of determined faces, helping to drag the injured to safer ground. Fear twisted Rune's gut, but an unshakable conviction led each step. The Dominion was prepared for a typical quelling of unruly civilians. They did not expect a sustained protest. And as more people flooded in from side streets, the Dominion lines faltered. Military vehicles began to roll in, overshadowing the square. Yet still the people refused to disperse entirely. They had been driven for too long by fear. Now they had a spark. They had each other. Under the relentless midday sun, chaos erupted. Tear gas canisters rained down, and stun grenades popped in every direction. People shielded one another with improvised barricades of corrugated metal. The entire city block reverberated with the raw spectacle of a population that had reached its breaking point. Among that throng, faintly battered but standing tall, was Rune at the front line. An unknown neighbor recognized the face from the broadcast. Others soon spotted it too and shouted their support. A cry rang out, "Let Rune speak!" Though overshadowed by the cacophony, it gained momentum until the crowd quieted slightly. Rune stepped onto a toppled piece of Dominion cargo, ignoring watery eyes and a burning throat from residual gas. The hush was surreal as thousands of eyes turned upward. In those trembling seconds, it felt like all of Ionis, maybe the entire planet, balanced on a fragile edge. Voice hoarse, Rune broke the silence. "I never wanted to lead, but we all want freedom, don't we?" Another hush, thick with possibility. "We stand here risking everything, and we stand not just for ourselves, but for those taken from us. For those forced into labor camps, for our children who deserve a future." As if on cue, the lines of Dominion soldiers tensed. The sputtering of vehicles advanced, and the troopers raised their weapons. But the crowd did not budge. Anger and determination shimmered in every face, stoked by the memory of that rescue video, and the knowledge that Rune's someone so ordinary had already defied the Dominion and lived. Then, from amid the crowd, a projectile soared through the air and collided with a Dominion mech walker, causing a small explosion. The confrontation erupted into chaos. Some protesters, armed with homemade devices, began scuffling with stormtroopers at the edges. Dazed from the explosion, the mech reeled back. Another wave of tear gas canisters launched overhead. Screams replaced the hush. Rune jumped from the makeshift dais, chest tight, glancing about for an escape route for the unprotected. Yet, incredibly, as the Dominion made its move, a flood of reinforcements poured in from the side streets. Supporters from other neighborhoods, other communities. Their numbers swelled precipitously, culminating in a surging wave that overwhelmed the Dominion perimeter. The soldiers, faced with a sea of defiance, began to withdraw in confusion, which fueled the protesters' fervor. A crest of solidarity rolled over Ionis. The day ended with the Dominion forced to abandon certain key checkpoints, their intimidation tactics no longer the assured victory they had been. That was the first spark of widespread rebellion. The days that followed saw a deepening of this tide. While the Dominion still retained control of major strongholds and had overwhelming firepower, The contiguous civilian unrest was new territory for them. Because the Ionis rebellion was not a single cell or group, it was the awakened consciousness of an entire populace. Some organized sabotage of official data centers. Others, more peaceful, led enormous strikes, halting production lines. Supplies intended for Dominion exploitation were redirected to impoverished city wards. Throughout it all, Rune's involvement shifted from an individual act of courage to a collective movement. With the help of Valora and the rest of the Ionis resistance, Rune broadcast messages of unity and perseverance every chance they got, every time they could hijack a Dominion signal. Sometimes the transmissions lasted only seconds before Dominion jammers took over. But the message was repeated so often that it became etched into the people's minds. We are more than we know. We are unstoppable together. Outside Ionis, other societies across the quadrant started watching with cautious optimism. Rumors spread of entire mine colonies on distant worlds refusing to meet their Dominion quotas. People chiseled graffiti into surfaces both digital and physical, referencing the unknown maintenance technician who had braved the underground prisons and refused to be silent. Tales grew in the retelling, and soon the ordinary reality of Rune's life was overshadowed by grand myths. Some said Rune single-handedly disabled Dominion warships. Others claim Rune was chosen by ancient cosmic forces. While Rune dismissed the embellishments, they served a purpose, encouraging more people to stand up. Of course, the Dominion would not let such defiance flourish unopposed. They tightened their military grip, launching a brutal crackdown. Curfews became indefinite. House-to-house searches escalated. They cut off power to entire blocks, hoping to snuff out resistance by wearing people down. But the Ionis rebellion was not reliant on official infrastructure. They lived on alleyway bartering, self-repaired power grids, smuggled medical supplies, and unwavering devotion to their cause. The more the Dominion tightened its fist, the more the city's population found ways to resist. In some neighborhoods, residents formed vigil groups that patrolled streets at night to protect the vulnerable. They used repurposed drones to spot Dominion maneuvers and give early warnings. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to keep morale alive. Amid the intensifying crackdown, the humans of Ionis City hardly slept. Dreams crumbled under the demands of an ongoing revolt. Many days, Rune felt more terror than hope. The lines of exhaustion made home in every subtle crease on Rune's face. The knowledge that entire families saw Rune as their beacon was simultaneously galvanizing and crushing. Despite the fear, Rune pressed on, fueled by the unstoppable momentum of thousands. And behind enemy lines, word trickled inside prisons that the iconic rescue had sparked more. People languishing in captivity found comfort in whispers of a city that refused to break. Finally, after months of escalating tension, the turning point arrived in the form of a Dominion super dreadnought, stationing itself in Ionis's skies. Officially, it was there to provide peacekeeping, but its main cannons loomed ominously, capable of incinerating entire districts if the Dominion so chose. Panic rippled across the city, but determination lingered. Valora and the Ionis resistance communicated with rebels stationed in that monstrous ship's supply lines. They discovered a vulnerability. The dreadnought used a massive cooling system that, ironically, tapped into Ionis's water reserves. The very pipes Rune once maintained served as the lifeblood of the Dominion's greatest threat. If those pipes were reconfigured, the resulting meltdown could disable the dreadnought's main weapon system, possibly turning the tide. The risk was colossal. Failure might cause a catastrophic explosion or provoke the Dominion to retaliate by bombing Ionis. But the Ionis rebellion had come too far to cower. Under the city, in the same dank tunnels where the first sabotage had occurred, Rune led a small team to reroute the water pressure conduits. Hours of delicate manipulation took place. The old tool belt that had once seemed like a sign of servitude was now an emblem of rebellion. When the final adjustment was made, Rune felt a lump in the throat. There was no turning back. Hours later, alarms shrieked from the dreadnought overhead. Civilians looked up at the sky as the vessel's underside glowed an unsettling orange. The Dominion tried to fire its main cannon, but a violent shudder racked its hull. A chain reaction of overheated reactors threatened meltdown. Dominion operators scrambled to power down the warship to prevent total destruction. At street level, cheers erupted. The unstoppable behemoth was forced to retreat into high orbit, half disjointed and no longer an immediate threat. The triumph was immeasurable, yet the Dominion presence remained. On the ground, legions of soldiers still patrolled. But as news of the dreadnought's retreat spread, the people's spirits soared. This, after all, was more than a single victory. It was proof that the Dominion machine could fail, that cracks could form in what once seemed monolithic. Bolstered by that realization, resistance movements in other cities mobilized in earnest. Where once Ionis stood alone, an entire continent rose in solidarity. Bit by bit, the Dominion's fortress of fear began to crumble. They could detain, muzzle, even execute, but every act of cruelty pushed more people into the rebellion. In the midst of that rising clamor, Rune's name ceased to be just a rumor. It was the voice that broadcast from hidden stations, the face glimpsed at rallies. State propaganda that labeled Rune a dangerous criminal only heightened the myth, inciting more cells to unify under one banner. Newly forming militias took to calling themselves the Maintainer, a tribute to the one who had once toiled in the shadows, keeping water filters operational. All this culminated in a grand confrontation, an assembly of allied rebels and fed-up civilians on one side, Dominion loyalists on the other. The Dominion tried to clamp down with a show of overwhelming strength, but the spirit of Ionis, forged in months of unstoppable defiance, refused to yield. In the final standoff, entire platoons of the Dominion surrendered or defected, unwilling to become scapegoats for an empire that had already lost moral ground. The battered city streets filled with spontaneous celebrations. People lit improvised beacons in once dark alleys. Families found each other, weeping tears of relief. Even the father of the child rescued weeks before stepped forward, hugging Rune in silent gratitude. It wasn't a clean or immediate victory. The Dominion retained outposts across the planet, and the fight for true liberation had only begun. But Ionis City, long overshadowed by despair, had ignited a revolution. The story of a lone maintenance worker turned symbol of defiance had gone beyond rumor. It had become living history. Messages flashed through 1,000 hidden networks, proclaiming that the Dominion's aura of invincibility was fractured. Doors, once bolted in fear, swung open to welcome rebel sympathizers. Supply lines rerouted themselves to sustain the new wave of freedom fighters. Far-off planets, even in distant star systems, saw the footage of Ionis's final stand and realized that the seeds of change could germinate anywhere. In the months that followed, Rune often walked the reclaimed streets that still bore the scars of battle. Passing the battered storefronts, the bullet-riddled walls, the toppled propaganda screens, the layers of grief and joy coalesced into a bittersweet tapestry. The weight of leadership remained, but Rune wore it with humility, deflecting grandiose titles. Children ran past, lively for the first time in their lives, shouting Rune's name as a playful war cry. Strangers nodded with respect in the streets, the unspoken gratitude heavy in their eyes. People no longer hid behind closed shutters but chatted openly as they repaired what was destroyed. Through it all, Rune recognized the power that a single possibility could unleash. When the rescue of that small group of prisoners was recorded and shared, it lit a flame in vulnerable hearts. That flame burned across an entire city, then a planet. Now it threatened to consume the Dominion's tyranny. For all their advanced weaponry, bureaucratic systems, and intimidation, they failed to conquer one intangible force: hope. On a quiet evening, long after the city's curfew laws had been dismantled, Rune stood atop a building once used as a Dominion watchtower. Below, families milled about with an ease that seemed almost surreal. Off in the distance, the faint lights of rebel outposts twinkled. A living network formed from solidarity. The battered old tool belt hung at Rune's side. A gentle breeze carried the aroma of street vendors serving freshly cooked meals, familiar, warm, and embodied with a sense of renewal. It was still a long road to genuine freedom for all. Dominion fortresses loomed elsewhere, and battles raged on distant continents. But Ionis City, once a place where no one dared even glance skyward, now found the courage to openly celebrate. In the hush of that rooftop moment, it dawned on Rune that courage did not spring from rare heroics or specialized training. It emerged from the refusal to accept injustice. Yes, fear was real, but it carried less weight than the unstoppable desire to see daylight break on a free world. In the days and years that followed, the growing rebellion would speak of that catalyst, the unassuming maintenance worker who had done the impossible. Some historians would analyze the viral rescue footage for every clue, every detail of that fateful night. Others would recount the subsequent citywide protests and infiltration missions led by Rune and the Ionius resistance. Scholars would note that even in the far corners of the galaxy, people hailed the example of Ionis as the beginning of the Dominion's downfall. Yet in the end, for Rune, none of that was as important as the everyday faces that rose up together. Ordinary neighbors, once timid, now unstoppable in unity. Eventually, the dreaded insignia of the Dominion was torn from city flags. Statues of faceless Dominion officers were toppled, replaced by memorials to the countless known and unknown citizens who risked their lives for a chance at freedom. Some explained that no single figure could have started it all, that the rebellion was inevitable. Others believed wholeheartedly that it was Rune's rescue, broadcast to millions, that lit the spark. Both views were right in their own way. The unstoppable synergy of a population hungry for change needed only one small flame to ignite the conflagration. In that sense, Ionis became a testament to the extraordinary results that can flow from a single, ordinary act of bravery. What was once only a flickering spark, a lone outcry against injustice, grew to become a blazing symbol for an entire galaxy. And although the battles ahead were many, a fundamental truth resonated across every transmission, every courtyard speech, and every battered stronghold. We are more powerful than we dare to believe, and sometimes it takes just one person to remind us of that undeniable fact.